In this episode, you get to see me give up zigzagging between Spain and Africa, reassess my travel plans, and become sentimental about the town that I left behind.
3rd of July, sunset, and I have to say I think this is the best wind I've ever had. It's quite a close reach, consistent, and that means that the boat will steer itself without me having to touch anything at all. And on this tack I'll get most of the way down to Africa before I turn left back up to the toward Ibiza, and then I'll have to wait for the next wind, which will take me. Once you get to the islands, the winds become more confused, so it's difficult to say if I'll have to stop there or if I'll just be able to carry straight on. But this will be a really, really good bit of sailing, I think, for the next 24 to 48 hours. Easy as.
Ya vienen los reyes por el arenal y le traen al niño una torre real con palitos verdes, hojas de limón, la Virgen María, Madre del Señor. Con palitos verdes, hojas de limón, la Virgen María, Madre del Señor. Ya viene la vieja con el aguinaldo, le parece mucho, la viene quitando.
It's about 1 o'clock in the afternoon now, and I was a bit optimistic about the ratio of the tack back and forth. I'm not actually going to be able to clear the Cartagena headland. I'm now coming back to Spain, and I'm going to cross a big shipping lane in order to get back to the Spanish coast. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to tack around again now, and probably for the next 24 hours I head right down to Africa until I can see the lights of Algeria, and then I'll turn around so that I don't have to tack back and forth across the shipping lane. I'd rather do much bigger tacks, and I suppose in about, 48 hours then I'll be up to La Manga or somewhere like that. But there's nothing for it because the wind is going to blow constantly in this direction through this stretch of the Mediterranean, so one way or another I'm going to have to tack if I want to get out of this plug hole. So I might as well do it now, man up, sure, get on with it. Well, it's 6 in the evening and I have actually decided to go back in towards Spain again. I got halfway across the strait toward Algeria, and I realised that my port of refuge would be Oran if the wind picked up any more. And I don't have an accurate forecast, and it could pick up. It's already pretty rough. I've reefed the sails a long way in, and you don't really want to be tacking around in this sort of weather. So if I'm going to get stuck on one side or the other of the strait, I'd rather with the Spanish side. So I'm going to try to find, I guess in the small hours of tomorrow morning, I'll get into a part of the Spanish coast, probably not a marina. I'll just drop an anchor in a bay if I possibly can. And yeah, I have to say I'm losing the battle to get out into the Mediterranean slightly. It might take a few more days, but I would just be quite glad not to have to risk the rig. The rig in this context means the shrouds which hold the mast up, big steel cables, and they slacken when they go under tension or they tighten up. And I lost one last year in La Coruña, and I'd rather it didn't happen again out here.
As I re-entered Spanish territorial waters that night, I was collared by the border control. I saw their large speedboat in the moonlight, without any navigation lights on, and I wondered if they themselves might not be smugglers when they climbed down little ladders with headlights on, climbed into dinghies, and started to dash toward me in the moonlight. Because I'd switched their navigation lights off, I decided to get on the radio and ask them if they needed any assistance. At least that way, if they were not the border patrol, everybody in the area would know that there was somebody out there up to no good. I'm afraid I think this rather offended them, because it had blown their aspect of surprise. Anyway, I got into the sleepy port of Garrucha in the early hours of the 5th of July, and as you can see, it's extremely empty, and there's a rather ominous sight. That boat there has lost its rig, you see. He's probably trying to do what I was trying to do. Here's how you eat at sea, by the way. Couscous or pasta, whatever. sweet corn, tuna, anything you get out of a can, and some chicken stock. Tastes like crap, but you can live off it.
I'm just going to check in and then I'll find a cafe so I can ensconce myself with a Wi-Fi connection and do a bit of work while I'm here. Before you can find somewhere that's open with Wi-Fi, you need to find somewhere that's open. You could hear a cat purr 2 miles against the wind. Well, having tacked rather uselessly between Europe and Africa, trying to make progress, I'm now trying a new strategy, which is to stick close to the Spanish shore and proceed using the land effect, because the wind will blow onshore quite often, but just next to the shore, on a rather broad reach. So I'm heading up the coast of Spain, and I have to say, it's working quite well. I'm pulling in between the shore and this little island I've seen, which has no population as far as I can tell, and I'll stay at anchor there.
I didn't even have to put down my anchor here because the European Union have put out several white mooring buoys along the Spanish coast as part of their kind of Kraft durch Freude program, which is frightfully nice of them. But you have to wonder what these bureaucrats are thinking. I mean, do they just assume that every citizen owns a yacht? Alas, I don't really know anyone on this part of the Spanish coast, so until I get to Italy, I think I'm probably going to be pretty antisocial. However, I did go to sleep that night thinking of the people I'd left behind in Marbella. There are quite a lot of Russians in southern Spain, in places like Porto Bernus, and they send their children to the international schools nearby in Marbella. But at the moment they're worshipping in a rather dingy little room off the motorway in Porto San Pedro, which is a pity because orthodoxy is one of the better ways in which Russia projects itself abroad and will probably be relevant, very relevant in fact, for the future of Western Christendom. The Spanish themselves aren't great ones for taking back Constantinople from the Saracen, but I did have the good fortune to be there while the Russian community were putting up their new church and cultural centre, which I think will represent an enormous advancement for orthodoxy on the Costa del Sol.
There are a lot of Russians, Ukrainian people, so they are not only in this area, they are also in Malaga, in Madrid, in Valencia, so it's probably even 500,000.
The patch of land which the Russians managed to get hold of to build their church and cultural centre was also wanted by the Muslims who wanted to put a mosque here.
Anyway, on that happy note, we continue our odyssey up the coast of Spain on a breath of wind, always hopeful that perhaps we might get blown out into the Mediterranean toward Italy, but I don't think I'll get there before the 20-something of this month, let alone Constantinople. And I look forward to the next group of people I might be able to meet on the way.
Well, that port was actually full as it happened, so I filled up with some diesel and I'm going to go 1 mile up the coast to the next place, which I see is much bigger.
Well, here we are at the rather beautiful but extremely expensive port of Cartagena. I think it's worth pulling into these places from time to time so you can get your laundry done, pick up more supplies and wait for a better wind.